Hi, I'm Samantha Madrid, Global Vice President of the Security Business and Strategy here at Juniper. Connected security has been Juniper's strategy for the past few years, ensuring that security is pervasive throughout the network, regardless of architecture. And speaking of architecture, Secure Access Service Edge is top of mind for many organizations. Here to speak with me today about SASE, Zero Trust, and securing the data center is Drew Samoas, our VP and Chief Information Security Officer. Hi, Drew.
Hi, Sam. It's good to see you today.
Yeah, it's good. And welcome to Juniper. You've been on board for a few weeks now.
Yeah, a couple months.
Oh, wow, a couple months. Time flies.
It does.
So let's jump right in.
Sure.
When we talk about SASE, we talk about cloud security, the number one thing that customers are always asking us about is my work from anywhere users. So how has this shift to cloud changed a strategy for customers around securing their mobile workforce?
Yeah. It's really, I think, opened people's eyes to a reality that existed even before COVID. You know, when we looked at the metrics around who was connecting at the office and who was a remote worker, what we found was even before the pandemic, the majority of users on any given day were remote. Whether that's a traveling salesperson or somebody visiting a customer site to support them or a number of reasons, people were not always as much in the office as we thought. And so it really helped people understand that they needed to provide pervasive security regardless of where the employee was, and to embrace something like SASE as a way to preserve the protection of the corporate systems, even in the disconnected use case.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I mean, if I think about before COVID, I was on the road maybe 3 out of the 4 weeks every single month. So that is a work from anywhere user.
That's right. And even as we return to the office, it really isn't going to change because people are still going to spend a significant amount of time as a disconnected user from the corporate sort of hub.
So what does it mean for customers? Because when you look at these new architectures like SASE, right, or SSE, which is, you know, the security being delivered directly from the cloud. A lot of those technologies, the firewall, the proxy, they're existing in customers' environments today on-prem. So what does this mean for them when they now have to think about delivering those technologies from the cloud?
Well, you have to go from a mindset of I have a location where people congregate and therefore I can establish a perimeter around that location. This is a traditional security architecture, and I can place a security stack on that perimeter. Now, with a remote user, your perimeter, your branch office is your hotel room. Your branch office is someone's living room. And you can't afford the same type of instrumentation, the same model of build a wall around that branch office or that remote location. And so by delivering the security in the cloud, you kind of reach that point of intersection where everyone's crossing through and you're able to clean the traffic and provide a secure connection regardless of whether they're in an airplane or in their bedroom.
So now, as a customer, I mean, do they abandon what they already have? Or, I mean, I would think it needs to, as you said, it needs to kind of follow that user, follow the device, because, I mean, their device, their smart connected device is the new gateway.
That's right. But you also have legacy. And every enterprise is still going to have something in a data center, whether it's a co-location or a data center they manage or something like that. So the old model still needs to persist, and you need to be able to protect that and evolve towards harmonizing that protection with the new model. So how do you provide a coherent policy framework across the portfolio of your security controls, regardless of whether delivered on-prem or in the cloud or even on the device itself? You want to have the ability to ensure an adequate level of protection, but you also want the simplicity of not having to sort of manage 3 different estates separately.
Yeah, because it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, if you have your firewall delivered from the cloud, you have your proxy, to me, having a single stack of software that kind of just, you know, looks at the traffic, inspects it, validates identity, applies the appropriate policy, whether I'm sitting at a cafe or I need access to information sitting in the data center.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the policy is very people-centric these days. It's about what enables work and what workload is being enabled for that employee, more so than the location, I think, is what we really should aspire to.
Yeah, it makes sense. What would you say, in your experience, the toughest challenge in getting there for organizations?
In some ways, is recognizing what the future is going to look like. Because there's a lot of competing visions, right? Whether it's a cloud only, a cloud first, a legacy only. And I think people need to sort of begin to understand what they aspire to before they can really start designing how to get to that future location. The other thing is getting through the noise, right? Because even a model like Zero Trust is still a concept more than it is a concrete architecture for a lot of companies. And there's so many different versions of these implementations, and so we have to learn which patterns apply to which problems. And so there's kind of growing pains, and those will need to be worked through before people can begin to adopt these things in a large scale. Right now, the very big, very capable companies who have the resources to work through those growing pains are leading the way, and then I think the followers and the fast followers amongst them will know where to go with a little more clarity.
You know what? I love working through the concept of kind of knowing where you want to be, and then kind of working towards that. And then through there, kind of working through those growing pains as you were just talking about. To me, that's all about experience.
Yeah.
It's about, revolutionizing the experience. It's taking a very experience-first approach.
That's right.
So what are some things that customers should think about, partners should think about in the context of experience first when you're making that shift to the cloud, both for the organization and for the user?
Yeah, cloud is an experience model, right?
Yeah.
It's much more than a technology model. It's a what does that feel like for the end user who's accessing those resources, and that mindset, I think, has to be pervasive. It's a sort of user design focus of how do I want my employees to be interacting with technology in a way that enables them to be productive. Particularly in the tight talent war that we have these days, you don't want your employee to come in and have to struggle to be productive. You don't want them to have to be burdened by a heavy security barrier or even a difficult to access technology stack. So it's about thinking that through from a productivity perspective, from a simplicity perspective, and working back from that to say, how would I enable my employee to have that kind of a day? And to be that kind of protected and to be that kind of productive. What are the things I have to put in place to make that happen? And then how do I manage that in a way that it's sustainable? So you also have to think about it from the administrative experience of what's easy for the technology administrator to be able to produce that experience for the end user. So it's kind of a multifaceted view, but you have to think about it with that sort of, when someone's touching a keyboard, what is their day like?
Yeah. I like that you simplified it up front by saying, the cloud is about experience. And so this shift to cloud is ever so important if you're really kind of driving to that end goal.
That's right.
So you mentioned something in one of your earlier comments about the data center and Zero Trust. So how do you think SASE influences the data center strategy, kind of Zero Trust architectures, if at all?
Yeah, well, it harmonizes the controls, right? It gives you a consistent way to apply the sort of protections that are going to support that Zero Trust. Because like Zero Trust doesn't mean no security. It means I want to take a decision about the access that an individual is trying to create at the moment that they're trying to create it. So I want to be informed about a number of dimensions about that person, about the workload, about the sort of security demands of that intersection, and I want to be able to apply controls appropriately and simply. And so SASE gives me that ability to have a ubiquitous control layer that follows that interaction, whether it's coming back into a VPN for an on-prem resource, or whether it's going out to the cloud for something in one of the majors, or hitting a co-location. So it sort of gives me that universal and readily available, consistent way to apply controls.
I love that. And that was kind of the genesis of Connected Security when I joined and we kind of brought this strategy to market. It's about bringing security to every point of connection. as you said, right? So you can safeguard your users, your applications, and your infrastructure. And I think a lot of times with these newer architectures, and whether it be the evolution of Zero Trust or the SASE architecture, sometimes we kind of keep it confined to the traditional security technologies.
Yes.
And we forget that, when you infiltrate a network, you're kind of bypass those traditional sometimes security technologies. So if your routers are smarter, your switches are smarter, your access points can detect, kind of behavioral abnormalities, then it's more secure.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's like everything else, right? With shift left mentality, the earlier in the process you can detect the abnormality and address it, the cheaper it is and the more effective it is.
Yeah.
Right. So you can wait and get an identity-based attack when somebody's logging into an application and you see all sorts of strange behaviors there, or maybe your network understands the difference between that person who connected a few minutes ago from Sunnyvale and is now connecting from some location that's very far away from Sunnyvale, right? And just that IP-based traffic can give you insights into abnormalities that you can interact with much more quickly and much more effectively, and begin to isolate that traffic. So the smarter the network is, the less chances there are for attacks to move up the stack.
Completely agree. And I think a big thing is that you just touched on is identity, right? I think, from as far back as I can remember, for going on 20 plus years now, I mean, we heard a lot about social engineering.
Yeah.
And that still remains, at least correct me if I'm wrong, you see this day in and day out, but it feels like that's still the main effective
For sure.
Method for infiltrating an organization, and doing so from stealing someone's identity, going into the organization and kind of spoofing who they are.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, that's the basis of most phishing attacks. And it's a shame that still people are very willing to participate in those kinds of attacks, and they don't even know, right? I mean, and it's getting harder for them to tell. The recent attacks have made phishing, all the training that we've done is sort of irrelevant because they have discovered new ways to attack the end user in a way that training didn't anticipate. So we've got to play that cat and mouse game and constantly be retraining people. But we also have to recognize that they have a limited amount of bandwidth.
Yeah.
And so we can't have security take more of their attention than doing their own job. But sometimes it feels that way to people.
Well, it's funny, maybe not funny. So your organization did a test and does periodic tests for everybody. And I saw an email come through and I'm like, this doesn't look right. And so I just ignored it. And then another came through and it wasn't a test. And I ignored it again. And then finally, I thought it was fake phishing.
Right.
And then someone pinged me and was just like, we actually need you to go and approve
that's
something.
right,
and I'm like, oh, I ignored it. And so, it's, and I asked, I'm like, is this actually real?
Right.
And I think that's a big thing. People have to be a little bit more hyper aware.
Yeah, and back to that user experience, right?
Yeah.
We can't design business processes that look like phishing, or else we're going to get more phishing that looks like business processes.
That's so smart. Okay, one more question.
Okay.
For you is, just in general, not even talking about SASE or Zero Trust per se, but what would you say are the number one thing, aside from experience, because we talked about that a lot, that is anybody sitting in your seat as a CISO in their organization, what's the number one best practice or lesson learned from your perspective that they should guide their team on in wanting to adopt cloud?
Yeah, I guess if I were to give it the number one is that the world isn't going to work as you expect it to, right? I mean, regardless of what technology you adopt or what model you try to apply, it's not going to be like it is in the textbook. And so you've got to have the mentality of adaptability. You've got to go into it with a sort of, we're going to get part of the way there and we're probably going to have to make a turn. We're going to make mistakes along the way because these things are evolving, and the attackers force that evolution.
Yeah.
They pick where we have decided to strengthen to avoid, and they choose to attack where we have decided to maybe not prioritize. And so as we adopt more controls, they move in different directions, and that forces us to sort of abandon or adjust our strategy. And so it's and all these things are multi-year initiatives, right?
Yeah.
Zero trust or anything like that. And so it's easy to get that fixation on the target and say, you know what, I'm going to spend the next 2 years adopting a zero trust model. But you have to realize that during that time, the attacker is adapting to what you're doing. And so you can't get locked on the goal without the ability to pivot and adjust your course based on how attackers are adjusting.
I love that adaptability.
Yeah.
They're adapting to us, so we
That's
have
right.
to adapt to them.
We have to understand that
Yep.
and do that. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it
Loved
tremendously.
it, and welcome, Juniper.
Thank you very much.